Prince Anaba of Kunkua was forced to marry the princess of the neighboring town even though he was in love with Tini, a farmer's daughter. Unable to defy his father, King Awene, he reluctantly agreed to the arranged marriage. However, on the night before this wedding, he met with Tini for one last time under a tree in the woods to say his final goodbye. Overcome by passion, they became intimate and spent the night in each other's arms. The next morning, they went their separate ways with hearts filled with grief, and by sunset, the prince married Princess Ania as planned. A few months later, Tini realized she was pregnant, and out of loyalty to Prince Anaba, she did not disclose the father's identity to anyone, knowing very well it was him. This made her endure ridicule from her family and community, who condemned her by names such as harlot and prostitute, and accused her of sleeping around with so many men that she couldn't pinpoint the father of the child she carried. The prince had promised to meet Tini under their special tree once every year at the exact time they had last met. Tini knew she had to endure the insults until then, by which time she would have given birth and her baby would be at least 3 months old. Throughout her pregnancy, Tini suffered the painful scorn of family, friends, and strangers alike. Rumors of her supposed promiscuity reached the prince's ears, but he did not believe them. He suspected he knew the truth and longed to see Tini, but waited patiently for their arranged meeting. When the day finally came, Tini arrived with her beautiful, healthy baby boy, whom she had named Atanga. The prince was overjoyed to see them both, immediately recognizing Atanga as his son. A ritual of purification was required for any child born out of wedlock, especially one from the royal family, in order to be accepted into the royal household. This ritual could only be performed by a priest who lived about 10 miles away across the largest lake in the town. The prince decided to go immediately with Tini and Atanga to the priest, planning to return and share the news of his son with the royal family. His hope was that by completing the ritual first, the family would have no choice but to accept Atanga as one of their own. They found a boat close to the lake, owned by an old man known for his wickedness and malice. Unaware of his reputation, Tini and the prince innocently boarded the boat with Atanga. Midway across the lake, the old man recognized the prince and understood the situation. Filled with spite, he decided to end their lives rather than allow a peasant's child into the royal family. By this time, they got to the middle of the lake, and he had devised his dubious plan. He knew Prince Anaba was too strong for him to attempt to struggle with, so instead of a confrontation, he chose a more cowardly approach, which meant ending his own life in the process. Before anyone realized, he suddenly raised up the anchor of the boat high above his head and heaved it viciously down into the center of the boat, causing it to crash through the wood, creating a large enough hole to sink the boat in a matter of minutes. He caught them by surprise, and as the boat quickly sank and they began to drown, a fisherman who had spotted what was happening from a distance away in his boat arrived too late to save everyone, but at least he heard the prince's plea to save his son. The fisherman recognized the prince and understood the gravity of the situation. The prince kept repeating, "Save my son, he is the grandson of Azure Kampati." This confused the fisherman because he did not know the king to be called Azure Kampati. This didn't matter at the moment, however. Trying to rescue all of them, the fisherman reached for Tini and the prince, but his boat began to capsize from the added weight, and Tini cried out, "Take my son, take Atanga, take him!" With no other choice left, the fisherman took Atanga, leaving Tini and the prince, who disappeared into the water immediately after. he managed to rescue Atanga, but the prince and Tini tragically drowned, along with the wicked old man. After the rescue, the fisherman, terrified and unsure what to do, returned to his town to see his father, who by coincidence was the priest the prince and Tini were on their way to see. He explained everything to his father, and immediately his father understood the situation and why the prince and Tini were coming his way. Without delay, the priest performed the ritual on Atanga that was meant to be done by his parents. Afterwards, he instructed his son to take care of the baby, explaining that Atanga was destined for a life of hardship, turmoil, and pain. He would need a father figure to guide him through it all until the right time when he would find his true place in society and reunite with his family. The fisherman respected his father's wish and raised Atanga as his own son. As a child, Atanga was active, athletic, and full of life. He grew up with hope and genuineness in his heart, always seeing the best in everything and everyone. However, as Atanga became a young man, he began to face the harsh realities of life. People saw him as a bastard and treated him accordingly. He faced betrayal, heartache, and pain, and was often accused of things he had not done. Despite this, Atanga managed to maintain his positive outlook, always giving others the benefit of doubt until they proved him wrong and hurt him again and again. But somehow, this only made him stronger and better. Even though many despised him, whenever there was an impossible task to fulfill, he was the one person everyone looked up to, and he never disappointed. He was always very determined and consistent. By the time he turned 20, he was handsome and caught the eye of most of the women, but none of them genuinely wanted to be his wife. They only wanted a taste of him, which he never gave. For the 10 years that followed, he was true to himself. He valued himself and preferred to wait on someone who would take a genuine interest in getting to know him and accepting him for who he was. Meanwhile, back in King Awene's palace, the princess who had married Prince Anaba had long left the king's side just a year after the prince disappeared, remarried, and had 3 beautiful daughters with her new husband. These daughters grew up to be admired by all the men in the village, with the youngest, Apoka, being the most attractive. Men flocked to her trying to win her attention, but she remained unimpressed by their gifts and their status. She sought something genuine in a man, something that would bring out the best in her and fill her with life, which none of these suitors seemed to offer. King Awene, on the other hand, remained deeply saddened by the loss of his son, which was soon followed by the loss of his wife to grief and sickness. He now lived an empty life and was hardly a shadow of the king he once was. He had spent years searching for his son to no avail, never understanding what had happened. The prince's fate remained a mystery until one day when the townspeople discovered the remains of the sunken boat in the middle of the lake. And among the wreckage, they found some of the prince's royal garments. It was then that the king realized his son had indeed drowned. But he never understood how it happened or why his son had gone on the lake in the first place. The king, feeling empty and desperate for closure, decided to challenge people from the neighboring towns as well as his own. The challenge was simple. He needed the best swimmer to dive into the depths of the lake where his son had died and retrieve the royal crown that was never found. He promised to grant any wish within his power to whoever found the crown. The news of the challenge reached the fisherman on the other side of the lake, who was now Atanga's foster father. Being the only one who knew Atanga's secret, he immediately saw an opportunity to reunite Atanga with his true family. Though he lacked concrete evidence, he remembered Prince Anaba's dying words about Atanga being his son and the grandson of Azore Kampati. This detail confused the fisherman, however, as he did not know the king by that name. Still, he never doubted the prince's claim. The fisherman told Atanga about the contest and began to help Atanga, who was the best swimmer in the community already, to become an even better swimmer. Atanga, already strong and experienced and determined, took the lessons very seriously and left even his father in awe of his exploits. When the month of the competition arrived, Atanga was more than prepared. Upon his arrival at the neighboring town, Atanga encountered a disturbing scene. 3 men, seemingly part of the royal guard, were attempting to assault a woman. Despite the risk to himself, Atanga intervened. He fought bravely, severely injuring the men till they ran away, but he sustained some injuries himself, which left him laying down helplessly after the men scurried away. The woman, who happened to be the beautiful maiden Apoka, feeling responsible for Atanga's injuries, returned to help him. She tended to his wounds and took him to her family's private cottage to recover. As Atanga healed, they spent time together, developing a strong connection. The woman found Atanga intriguing and different from anyone she had met before. Atanga soon regained his strength and reunited with his father, and they resumed preparation for the contest. On the day of the competition, many of the swimmers gave up early. Atanga was one of only 4 men who persevered, repeatedly diving into the depths of the lake to search the bottom for the royal crown. The king and townspeople, including Apoka, watched anxiously from the shore. Eventually, 3 men returned, admitting defeat. Atanga, however, kept searching, moving further and further away from sight. Hours passed and Atanga did not return. Apoka, who had now developed strong feelings for him, desperately wanted to call out, urging him to return, but she restrained herself to avoid drawing her family's attention. As Atanga swam further and further away from view, the townspeople waited, hoping for his return. After several hours, they concluded that he must have drowned, and everyone left the lake shore, believing Atanga was lost forever. Everyone returned home, including the king, who felt bad about what had happened, but was still consumed by the emptiness of losing his own son. Apoka, who remained at the lake shore with Atanga's father even as everyone else had left, sobbed quietly all night and ended up sleeping by the lake till the next day, whilst Atanga's father stayed up all night keeping watch. She eventually surrendered her hopes and left Atanga's father, but she would return with food for him every day until 7 days had passed. She came to terms with the fact that Atanga was gone for good, and when she returned to the lake on the morning of the 8th day, she closed her eyes to say a final farewell prayer for Atanga. As she opened her eyes to leave, she glimpsed an object on the water's surface. It couldn't be. Hope flickered in her heart as she watched the figure draw closer. To her amazement and joy, it was Atanga. She ran into the water, meeting him knee-deep. Overwhelmed with relief, she embraced him tightly. Atanga, unused to such affection, hesitated before returning the hug, experiencing a peace he had never known. The moment was interrupted by the woman's sisters approaching. Atanga urged her to go whilst he made his way to his father, who was relieved and overjoyed to reunite with his son. Together, they went to see the king with the recovered crown. By this time, news of Atanga's return had spread and the town gathered at the king's palace. Atanga presented the crown to the astonished king, explaining how he had scourged the entire lake, determined to complete this task, until he found the crown resting beneath a rock, covered in decay, at the bottom of the farthest end of the lake. Impressed, the king offered Atanga anything he desired. Before Atanga could respond, the fisherman spoke up, recounting his encounter with the prince and Teni years ago. As he mentioned the prince's dying words about Atanga being the grandson of Azore Kampati, the king's demeanor changed. Recognizing his childhood nickname known only to his son and late wife, the king realized the fisherman was telling the truth. The king welcomed Atanga as his grandson. Atanga, shocked to learn of his heritage, felt a sense of peace and belonging he had never known. Suddenly feeling a slight sense of guilt, he turned to his adopted father. But the king immediately declared the fisherman his son as well, granting him equal status in the kingdom as his own son would have. The town erupted in celebration. Among the crowd, Apoka stood quietly, smiling intensely at the man who could have very easily been her stepbrother. Their eyes met, and they shared a warm smile, both filled with hope for their future together. This moment marked the beginning of a new chapter for Atanga. The woman he loved and the entire town of Kunkua promised a new journey filled with possibility and joy ahead of him.